When you walk into your office and you look at your board and you
Yeah.
see where these players are and all the names are slotted in, what is the first thing to sort of eat at you when you say, I got to get this better. I got to fix this part?
Yeah, that's one of those things. It's like it's on paper, so I never feel comfortable. There's always spots to get better. There's depth, that we got to keep getting deeper. So, that journey never ends. Right now, we got a lot of young players we just added that I'm super excited about. And I'm hoping, some of those vets kind of bring them along as well, so that it actually is a good situation once we get to the regular season, which I think it will be.
What's your philosophy on leadership? Do you want leaders to assign? Do you assign leadership, or are you hoping that there are people who develop into leaders?
I would take, I'm a guy that I think you got to let that happen naturally. The locker room's a space where that's got to happen naturally. You can't force it. If you do force it, it gets sniffed out quick. It doesn't work. And that's part of the job of myself and our scouts that go to these schools and even, collect information on free agents. What kind of people are they? How do they lead? Are they outspoken, or is it by action? So we're aware of the guys that should naturally take over. And for most cases, it happens.
Are you going to sign a veteran edge rusher?
We'll see. We'll see. We're working on it. We don't stop working and looking at different avenues to bring players in. There's some options, potentially, trade options. There's also, some guys on the street still that could potentially come in and help us. So we're kind of looking at everything right now. Maybe something will happen sooner rather than later.
Ryan, how do you go about the evaluation process? Like, let's say that you don't have all of the pieces that you need to necessarily look at the defense that you want. How do you then go about evaluating the individual players inside of your defense with knowing that you don't have everything to necessarily make them successful?
Yeah, I think that's a combination of scouting as well as coaching. If you're a little light in certain areas, how can you scheme it up to protect that area or make it more productive? Especially when you talk about O-line or D-line, there's certain things inside rush, there's games, there's different things you can do to be more productive. So I know regardless of what the setup is, I know that collaboration between myself and my staff and our coaches, we'll have a plan in place to be as effective as we possibly can.
Then what are your marking points for development, and how do you make sure that you trust that scouting instinct and say, I don't have to spend on this position because from what I've seen, this guy's going to be ready? I know it's an inexact science, but how do you trust your ability to say, I'd rather spend money elsewhere because I know this guy is going to improve?
Yeah, it's a delicate balance. Again, that collaboration between the coaching staff and front office of where guys are trending. You have different checkpoints. Like right now, we got a lot of the vets in here training. So you're looking at, did they get bigger? Did they get stronger? What do they look like in terms of their movement and assignments? Are they learning so they can react faster? So you're always putting these data pieces together to see, is that guy going to be ready and perform well? And in some cases, it does work. Other cases, you might come up a little bit short. You got to make some adjustments, in training camp or during the season. So that's the big thing about staying disciplined that I've talked about since I've been here. Is the big thing is are you flexible enough to be able to make adjustments when you need to? And I think we've done that. So we'll continue to evaluate what we have and fill in, where we think we might need a little bit more help.
The reason I ask that is as I'm curious about how confident you are that Chase Claypool particularly will fulfill your expectations you had when you traded for him.
Yeah. No, I believe he will. I think there's a track record, especially when he was in Pittsburgh, that leads you to believe he can be a high performer in this league and contribute. Now that we're even more, balanced across the board at the receiver position, tight end position, we got more protection. We're, in terms of running the ball and staying balanced. And then on top of that, you give a full offseason to a guy to create, trust and timing with your quarterback. So that's what I'm leaning on right now, and we'll see if that happens.
There's been a lot of conversation about the workout that you put Darnell Wright through. Ryan, how did you develop that? Was that something that you brought in? Was that a collaboration with coaches? And what do you think it tells you about a player?
Yeah, no, I think anytime you're pressed to kind of that threshold, you can find out about yourself, or you can find out about other people and how they carry themselves in terms of body language, in terms of mental, reaction speed, and that's important to us because this game is hard. You're going to be pressed, and we want to see if you can keep it tight. And that resilience and grit is something that we have to have up front. So anytime you've been around football enough or you've played, you've been pushed to the brink like that, and you've seen guys that can't handle it. You see guys that handle it like it's no big deal. So it was just important to us, and he passed with flying colors.
It makes me think about Jalen Carter's pro day and what kind of negative impact that might have had when I hear you discuss it like that. Was Jalen Carter off your board completely, or was there a point where you've decided we're not going to let him get past us at this point?
Yeah, I'll say this, and I'm not getting into specifics about that, but I will say that our culture is important. I'll say that we know where our roster is right now and what it can handle, what it can't handle. And I think that's part of being intelligent in this space is knowing your locker room and where it's at. And I'm happy we made the decision that we made. And, specifically on Jalen, I think he went to a fantastic place that has kind of like their cement's dried and their foundation is what it is with a ton of leaders. So we love Darnell. He's going to help us. He's got grit to him. He is dirty tough, and I absolutely love him. So I'm pumped with the guy that we got.
Outside of the film, what are the things about Justin Fields that made it easier for you to make the decisions that you made as it pertained to trades and what you were going to do in the draft?
Yeah, just seeing growth and development as a pro, how he handles it, just how receptive he is to our coaches as well. You can see him taking each and every step as a leader and kind of taking over the locker room and the offense. So we're confident, man. Obviously, we showed that in our actions. So I'm excited for what he's going to show this upcoming year.
Was there a moment inside of last season where you went, wow, I mean, there are things that you guys are seeing in practice that none of us see. But to see him do some of those things inside of games, what was that like as the general manager of a team to see a player grow like that?
Yeah, it was awesome. Anytime you have a guy that can make plays and change a game single-handedly, obviously not single-handedly, but with his skill set, that is so intriguing, and that's what you love about the game and those special ones. So obviously in practice we see that a bunch, but when you see it in game, it's just a whole different speed, and that's what you love. So we're pumped about him.
Are you currently pursuing contract extensions in talks with anybody on the roster?
You know what? We just got done with the draft, so we're just kind of starting to get organized, and we're going to start meeting about that and see what kind of plan we want to put in place and who to start with and go from there. But it's definitely a priority to get some of our guys done.
When you were putting together your off-season plan, was it at all overwhelming because you did have the number one pick and you did have a lot of money underneath the cap? How did you approach not going overboard and trying to get everything that you possibly wanted, understanding that there's still time to continue building through the draft and free agency?
Yeah, I think just leaning on the fact that, when I first got in here, we talked about sustaining success for a long period of time, and that requires discipline. So we just stayed disciplined in our approach. We let our board speak back to us in terms of, where the value of the players were. Did the tape match, certain demands, financially, and then obviously the bread and butter is just working through the draft and bringing in really good young talent. So we brought those two things together. And again, I think it's just really rooted in discipline and doing things the right way.
When it came to setting the board, how How hot did some of the conversations get? Did you have the proverbial scout standing on the table for somebody? And how did you learn to be a moderator and maybe the deciding vote in some of these discussions of what to prioritize based on the sometimes divergent opinions of trusted scouts?
Yeah, it took a long time, just in my background being through the way that we run our meetings, which is a very collaborative setup where, everyone has a voice. So if you don't have a good moderator, it can get out of control. So I think there's a lot of respect in our room too. So guys do speak their mind, but they never cross the line and get personal. But you always have those conversations. They're fun. They're the ones that you're always going to look back on and enjoy, especially as we track on how guys do throughout their career. So, moderating it, I've kind of learned to, as a leader, you got to speak last. Let your people speak and speak their mind. There's times where we do some blind voting. We'll put a QR code up. Guys will put in their selection, and it'll rank it on how the room feels without much groupthink. So we do different techniques to kind of get to where we need to go. At the end of the day, for me, it's collecting all that information and then leaning on the kind of my gut instinct on what we're going to do.
From an X's and O's standpoint, when you were looking at the tape of DJ Moore, how did you envision that he could help your offense grow?
Yeah, there's an element of, being compatible with our quarterback, which one of his strengths is moving the ball down the field, and he's capable of doing that, tracks it really well. And then at the same time being able to separate. We look for guys that can separate and get open. He does that well too, which obviously throwing to a more open receiver is valuable. And then the last step is just run after the catch. He's a guy that, when you get up close to him, he's actually way more thick and stronger than what you would imagine. So all three of those things are really going to help our offense be more efficient and more explosive.
Talking to Bears general manager Ryan Poles on the Bernstein and Holmes show. You're listening to Sports Radio 670 The Score, WSCR HD Chicago, WBMX HD2 Chicago, and Odyssey Station. Ryan, what did you learn about yourself as a watcher of Bears games? Because different general managers either control their emotions differently, compartmentalize them, or completely hide them, knowing that sometimes you might be visible on camera. You don't have the luxury of doing what I get to do, sitting on my couch and throwing things at the television and stomping around sometimes. So do you sublimate that tension, or do you not have that tension during games?
No, you know what? It was a really good learning experience this year. I probably experienced all of the above. There was times where I probably didn't control myself very well. Thankfully, I wasn't seen and broke a couple of trash cans. But
when did you break the trash cans?
I can't tell you that. I can't tell you. During a frustrating time. So there's those moments, but then it's also like, all right, you got to keep your composure. You got to let kind of that 24-hour period kind of sleep on some stuff and then show up the next day with a clear mind and really about finding solutions rather than pointing at problems and letting your emotions get the best of you. So really good learning experience. Probably, like I said, just being transparent probably hit all of the above.
We were struck by how transparent you've been inside of letting people into the process of what it was in the trade market and what you were thinking in the draft. There's some people who think that you have to be completely opposite when you're in that sort of position in the NFL. What made you feel comfortable enough to share some of the things that you were going through having the number one pick?
Yeah. I don't know. It's just the way I kind of always have been. There's a time and place where there's family business that you can't share, but then I think it's important to kind of go through the thought process. Sometimes I think, especially I've seen, narratives run that, it's like we're going to play a game in Germany, and it's just not true. So I just think approaching it with truth and transparency is a way, especially for our great fan base to kind of understand what we're thinking. There's going to be times I'm right, and I'll be happy about that. And there's going to be times where I'm wrong, and I'll just have to own it for what it is. It's just the way I operate. So I've been happy with it so far.
Hearing that, I'd love to ask you about how you view your relationship with the media and the media that represents the fans locally, because increasingly in the NFL, stories are broken nationally. They're
Yeah.
broken by Adam Schefter and by Ian Rappaport. And yet, here in Chicago, this is a robust core of hardworking, local, regular reporters. Lawrence has been a Bears beat reporter. I started out years ago as a Bears beat reporter. How do you try to balance the obvious access that the national guys have while building local relationships that can be more important to your fans sometimes?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. That relationship piece is important. I would think, generally speaking, the relationship with national media is kind of the foundation, especially before you move into a new place. And then as you build relationships with people, you're able to have that kind of openness and that transparency, at certain times when it's right. So I think it's like one of those things where it just takes time to build that trust.
I'm trying to figure out how to be fair to your team this season, Ryan, and I'm hoping you can help me out with this. How will you determine success for the 2023 Bears if we aren't necessarily talking about wins and losses? Or is that on the table? Is wins and losses an indicator of success for you this season?
Yeah, we recently talked about that, and we talked about having a championship mindset. Where we are in the process doesn't matter. Our goal will always remain the same. That's to take the division. So that's our bar of success. So that's what we go after. Where we fall from that, that's a learning experience and figuring out why did we not get there or why did we get there. So to me, that stays the same. It's the division. It's the championship. It's the Super Bowl. That's where we aim. That's where our arrow is pointed, and that's where we go. And then when we're done with that, if we fell underneath it, we'll figure out why, what adjustments do we have to make, and we'll go from there.
Brian, there was something we were talking about yesterday that we said we were going to ask you today, because we were telling stories about sports experiences in far-flung places or places where you ended up outside of your expectations. As a scout, what was one of these nights down the furthest, darkest, loneliest road where you found yourself to go scout some player that, well, maybe nobody's seen this guy or maybe he's not on the radar. I got to check this one last time, where you're wondering to yourself in some godforsaken highway in a rental car saying, what am I doing here and what do I do for a living?
The drive from Moscow, Idaho to Bozeman, Montana.
What was that drive like?
Some beautiful mountains, and then when it got dark, you couldn't see where you're going. I actually was, I was listening. I think it was like a Monday night game. I'm driving and really not paying too much attention to my speed or anything like that. Then sirens go off behind me, and I'm like, oh no, like I have no idea how fast I was going. The guy gets out, and I'm already across the Montana line, and he goes, sir, I've been tracking you for five miles. You've been going anywhere from 90 to 95 miles per hour. I was like, you got to be kidding me. I apologize. I'm just watching or listening to this game. He goes, well, I'm not going to give you a ticket. I'm just going to give you a warning. And that warning is there's moose crossing all over here. If you hit one, you're going to die. Have a good night.
Damn.
I mean, that's a pretty effective warning.
Yeah. Cruise control at 65 moving forward.